Okay, welcome to Seattle. It's the 5th Ave. Spring, Madison, in between Spring and Madison, Seattle Public Library. It's about 1 a.m. Let's just share a little knowledge. Goldstein, History of Modern Tibet, Volume 2, page 370, Confrontation and Adjustment. The Dalai Lama, the United States, and the Dalai Lama's brothers. As this process was unfolding in Lhasa, another page in U.S. Tibetan Relations occurred, again raising questions about whether those closest to the Dalai Lama, especially his older brothers, were dealing with the United States in his name, but without his knowledge or approval. In February 1952, Taktse Rinpoche, then living in the United States, told the State Department that he had just received a letter for the United States government from the Dalai Lama. This was presumably in response to the various messages the United States had sent to the Dalai Lama in late 1951, imploring him to flee the PRC. A copy of this letter, which the State Department said was undated and unsigned, is not available. But a portion of it was quoted in a State Department memorandum of 12 February 1952, which began by stating, quote, with reference to the most recent secret letter from Dalai Lama to Taktse. The letter is discussed in U.S. Department of State 1985, page 9, in a footnote to the 13th of February 1952 memorandum of conversation by Anderson in the Office of China Affairs that cited CA files, lot 59D 228, folder 7P. This letter from the Dalai Lama Taktse painted a relatively sanguine picture of the situation in Lhasa, presumably as an explanation of why the Dalai Lama did not flee into exile. God, a little tense there would be nice. Had not fled into exile. I mean, why he was not doing it right now, why he hadn't before, why he would not in the future. Let's see. The Chinese, the letter said, had given no open indication that they wanted to suddenly change matters in Tibet or injure the Tibetans. Under the circumstances, since the Chinese were being correct and careful, it seemed best to treat them in the same way. Same citation. However, the letter was also carefully crafted to try and sustain U.S. interest in Tibet, saying that Tibet's, quote, official friends, unquote, in the United States should not feel, quote, vexed because of this, since Tibet's policy remained and would remain the same, presumably meaning anti-communist. The letter also was said to have instructed Taktse to remain in contact, remain in contact with the Americans and not to allow misunderstanding or lack of confidence to develop between the United States and Tibet. All taken from the same source thus far. Goldstein is basing this entirely on one footnote in the State Department memorandum, because we don't have the full text of the letter itself. Sorry, American government won't release that. I thought you were open, USA. The implication was that the Chinese, quote, correctness would not continue, and Tibet would need its friend America again in the future. New paragraph. John Allison, Assistant Secretary of State for Far Eastern Affairs, must have been surprised by this positive assessment of the Chinese, given the more negative information the United States was being told by who. But he responded to Taktse sympathetically, saying, quote, the U.S. fully understands the difficult situation in which Dalai Lama finds himself, is not vexed at Dalai Lama's decision to adjust temporarily to superior force, and wishes to reassure Dalai Lama that U.S. sympathy will continue. He said that U.S. has not changed the position which was stated by his predecessor, Mr. Rusk. Mr. Allison, we now found this is a summary of the conversation. Mr. Allison stressed necessity for approaching present difficulties with courage and patience. John Allison, Assistant Secretary of State for Far Eastern Affairs. He, Allison, pointed out the U.S. was sincerely sympathetic with the Tibetan people for their loss of traditional religious and political freedom. Mr. Allison asked Taktse to convey these thoughts to his brother, the Dalai Lama. Allison assured Taktse that U.S. friendship and sympathy will continue. He explained his hope that the fall of Tibet to the communists will resemble the tactics of Japanese judo experts who fall in order to rise and gain the final victory. Yes, Tibet would be successful if they could simply mimic, replicate, or otherwise adapt Japanese characteristics. And some Tibetan aristocrats, actually, in Sichuan, were given Japanese swords by their, I believe, their Chinese counterparts. Yes, that's their CCP counterparts, in fact, as sort of gifts of respect. So here we have more, what fascinates me, I think it's a rather small point, but an interesting one nonetheless, adaptation and admiration for Japanese tactics in the post-war, right? The other question I have is all about the impact of the Resist America Aid Korea movement and the movement itself, the domestic movement in places like Gansu, Qinghai, on ethnic Tibetans, Western Sichuan. We have basically zero data on that, and I find it to be a fascinating question, particularly given the Dalai Lama's brother, who was a part of, he was running a monastery actually in 1951 up in Amdo, I think it was, or Qinghai. I mean, how did that sort of galvanize his anti-communist sentiments? Because the CCP was really stretching hard, I think, or pushing hard, I should say, and stretching sort of conceptions and people's ideological flexibility, pushing it to an extreme during that movement, because they're using the Kangmei Yuanchao, or the Resist America Aid Korea movement, in order to push all kinds of domestic agenda, which were rather, they're way beyond reformist. They're radical, transformationalist policies. Okay, at the end of this meeting, when Allison asked Taxi for suggestions on how the United States could be helpful to Tibet, Taxi replied that the United States should continue contacts with the Dalai Lama through him and should not do anything, quote, to invite undue attention to Tibet at this time through public statements. Quite a direction there. Instrumentalizing the U.S. He, Taxi, also assured Allison that the Tibetan people were clinging to the hope that something could be done later. There's a sentence for you. That basically encapsulates a huge amount of Tibetan policy right there. If the Chinese are gradualists, the Tibetans are almost lackadaisically gradualists. If I may editorialize based on my reading of Goldstein, okay? He assured Allison that the Tibetan people were clinging to the hope that something could be done later, and that the continued friendship of the United States was critical in continuing that hope. And maybe that strategy wins in the end, right? Who knows? Ooh. Horrible words there. Okay. Although we do not know what the entire letter said, from the few excerpts cited, it seems a reasonable response. What? To where? To whom? To what? To the situation? To the United States? To the American proposal? To the CCP adjustments? To gradualism? Goldstein's not clear. Although we do not know what the entire letter said, from the few excerpts cited, it seems a reasonable response. However, there is another less reasonable dimension to this event, namely, the real source of the letter. Ooh! He's just playing with us now. This is his Goldstein. The Dalai Lama emphatically denies sending Taxi the February letter. Oh! Based on Goldstein's interview with the Dalai Lama in 1995. So in 1995, the Dalai Lama denies ever sending the letter. Oh my. To be sure, his memory could be incorrect, or he could be worried about the impact of admitting this for his current political dealings with China. But if the Dalai Lama is correct, someone, or more than one, was clearly using Dalai Lama's name to pursue relations with the United States independent of him and the Tibetan government.